moment my financial advisor told me to disappear for 30 days and tell no one where I was going, I thought he'd lost his mind. His exact words, sitting across from me in that glass-walled conference room downtown, "Don't tell your brother, don't tell your mother, pack a bag tonight and call me when you land." I stared at him. "I just inherited a company, and you want me to vanish?" He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "I want you to find out what they plan to do with it before you show them your hand. My name is Fiona Mercer. I'm 31 years old, and until 8 weeks before that conversation, I had never once thought about what the word beneficiary actually meant in practice. I ran a small landscape architecture firm in Portland, drove a used Subaru, and ate dinner at my mother's house every other Sunday like clockwork. I thought I understood my family. I thought I understood my grandfather. I did not understand either of them at all. My grandfather, Robert Mercer, built Mercer Industrial Supply over 40 years. Hardware, safety equipment, commercial contracts across 6 states, nothing glamorous, everything solid. He died on a Tuesday in February, quietly, in the house he'd lived in since 1978, with a crossword puzzle half finished on the nightstand. The reading of the will happened 10 days later, in a conference room at the estate attorney's office. My mother sat across from me. My older brother sat beside her. My uncle, my grandfather's younger brother, drove up from Sacramento and sat at the end of the table like he owned the chair. The attorney read for about 20 minutes. I remember the fluorescent lights humming. I remember my uncle's pen tapping against the legal pad in front of him, slow and rhythmic, like a clock. And then the attorney said my name. "Fiona Mercer shall receive the controlling interest in Mercer Industrial Supply, LLC, including all associated assets, contracts, and intellectual property, as well as the primary residence at 4 Clearwater Drive." The pen stopped tapping. My mother's head turned toward me so fast I heard her neck crack. My brother went very, very still. I sat there with my hands in my lap and felt the specific dizziness that comes when the ground shifts under you and you can't tell yet whether it's going to stop. The company was worth $4.3 million. The house was worth another $600,000. And I had known nothing about any of it until that moment. My grandfather had never mentioned it, not once, not a hint. Every Sunday dinner, every birthday, every Christmas, he treated all of us the same, gruff and warm and slightly hard of hearing, and obsessed with the Portland Trailblazers. I found out later from his personal attorney, a man named Mr. Calloway, who handled his private affairs separately from the estate, that my grandfather had made the decision 3 years before he died. He'd watched how each of us handled money, handled pressure, handled disappointment. He'd watched my uncle drain a business partnership by his 50s. He'd watched my brother borrow against credit cards he couldn't pay and smile through it. He'd watched me build something small and keep it standing, year after year without asking anyone for help. He never told me, he just watched. But here's what I didn't know in that conference room. He'd also called Mr. Calloway 6 months before he died and updated a specific clause. And Mr. Calloway, who had watched over my grandfather's affairs for 22 years and trusted exactly what he'd been asked to trust, reached out to me 2 weeks after the will reading. He asked me to come in alone. I thought it was paperwork. It was not paperwork. He sat me down, set a folder in front of him that he didn't open yet, and said, "Your grandfather anticipated that certain members of your family might contest the will or attempt to access the company's accounts before the estate transfer was finalized. He asked me to watch for that. And Fiona, I've been watching." He opened the folder. Inside were emails, printed, dated, highlighted in yellow. My brother had contacted the company's operations manager 4 days after the will reading, not to offer condolences, to ask about the status of the business bank accounts and whether a cosigner arrangement could be modified before probate closed. My uncle had called 2 of the company's largest commercial clients directly and introduced himself as the family's representative during the transition period. He had no legal standing to do that. None. My mother had spoken to a real estate attorney about the Clearwater Drive property. She hadn't told me. She'd done it quietly, the week I was handling the funeral arrangements. Mr. Calloway looked at me across the desk and said, "They're moving fast because they're assuming you don't know what you have yet. Your grandfather told me that if this happened, I was to advise you to do something that will feel counterintuitive." What? Disappear. 30 days. Tell them the stress has gotten to you and you need time away. Tell them you're not sure you even want the company. Let them believe the door is open." He paused. "And then let me show you what they do when they think no one is watching." I drove home that night and sat in my kitchen for 2 hours without turning on a light. My brother had texted me 4 times that week asking how I was holding up. My mother had brought over a casserole. My uncle had sent flowers. All of it now felt like furniture rearranged in a room where something had been stolen. I called Mr. Calloway at 8 in the morning and told him I'd do it. I booked a flight to a rental cabin in western Montana. Told my mother I needed air. Told my brother I was overwhelmed and needed a few weeks offline. My uncle, I didn't tell anything because he hadn't asked. I turned off my personal phone, kept a second phone with only Mr. Calloway's number in it, and drove to the airport. The first week was quiet. Montana in early spring is gray and cold and very honest about itself. No performance, no softening. I walked along the river every morning and told myself I was doing the right thing and mostly believed it. On day 9, Mr. Calloway called. "Your brother submitted a petition to the probate court," he said. "He's claiming you have insufficient business experience to manage the company and is requesting the court appoint a professional administrator during the estate transfer. He's listed your uncle as a proposed co-administrator." I sat on the porch of the cabin and looked at the mountains and felt something go cold and flat inside me. "He filed this while I've been gone?" "He filed it 3 days after you left. He's been talking to a probate attorney for at least 2 weeks, which means he started this while you were still attending the funeral." I didn't say anything. "There's more," Mr. Calloway said. "Your uncle has drafted a letter to Mercer Industrial's Board of Operations. There are 3 non-family members on it, claiming that you've expressed reluctance to assume control, and that the family is exploring options to preserve the company's stability. He's trying to create a paper trail that suggests you've informally stepped aside." "I haven't signed anything." "No. But if the board starts acting on his communication, if contracts get redirected, if vendor relationships shift, it becomes much harder to untangle later. That's what he's counting on." I pressed the phone against my chest for a moment and breathed. Then I asked, "What does the clause say, the one my grandfather updated?" Mr. Calloway was quiet for a beat. "It says that any beneficiary who takes legal or financial action to contest, circumvent, or diminish another beneficiary's inheritance before or during probate forfeits their own interest in the estate entirely." Your grandfather added it specifically because he'd seen your uncle do something similar to a cousin's inheritance 15 years ago. He'd seen it 15 years ago, he'd written the clause, he'd waited. He'd known. "When do I come back?" I asked. "Day 30, Mr. Calloway said. "Let them finish. I need the full picture." Day 30 was a Thursday. I flew back to Portland on a red-eye, went home, showered, changed, and drove directly to Mr. Calloway's office without telling anyone I was back in the city. He had a second folder now, thicker than the first. He walked me through it like a professor going through a case study, methodical, almost gentle, because he knew what it was going to feel like to hear. My brother's petition was on record. His attorney had sent a letter to the estate's executor, a family friend my grandfather had named, suggesting that my extended absence and lack of communication indicated I was unfit to manage the transition. They had attached printouts of my landscape firm's revenue for the past 2 years, arguing it demonstrated I had no experience in industrial supply operations. My uncle had successfully convinced one of the 3 board members to hold off on renewing a major contract until family leadership was clarified. That contract was worth $280,000 annually. And my mother, who had brought me a casserole, had spoken with a property assessor and listed herself as a co-owner in transition on an inquiry about the Clearwater Drive property. She had not mentioned this to the estate attorney. She had not mentioned it to me. I sat across from Mr. Calloway and looked at the paper spread between us and felt the particular grief of understanding that a version of your family you believed in has never actually existed. "What do we do?" I said. He allowed himself a very small smile. "We go to the house." My mother had called a family meeting for Saturday afternoon. She hadn't told me, she told my brother and uncle. I was supposed to be still away in Montana. She was going to use the meeting to coordinate next steps on protecting the estate during Fiona's absence. Mr. Calloway and I arrived at 2047. The meeting was called for 3. My mother opened the door and the color left her face so completely I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You're back," she said. Flat, no warmth. The instinct to perform concern was overridden by the shock of being caught mid-step. "I am," I said. My brother appeared behind her in the hallway. He looked at Mr. Calloway's briefcase. Something flickered across his face, calculation, then fear, then a face that was trying very hard to look like neither. This is a family conversation," he said. "I'm aware," I said. "I'm family." My uncle stood up from the dining room table when we walked in. He had his hands in his pockets and his chin slightly lifted, the posture of a man who has spent decades believing that confidence and authority are the same thing. "Fiona," he said, "we were concerned about you, your brother thought." "Please sit down," Mr. Calloway said, pleasantly, unmovably. My uncle sat. Mr. Calloway set his briefcase on the table, the same table where we'd eaten Thanksgiving dinner the year before, where my grandfather had sat at the head and complained that the gravy was too thin, and then had 2 helpings of it, and opened it. He placed 3 documents on the table, face up, side by side. "This," he said, pointing to the first, "is the petition your son filed with the probate court, claiming Fiona is unfit to manage the estate." He looked at my mother. She looked at the tablecloth. "This," he continued, pointing to the second, "is the correspondence your brother sent to Mercer Industrials Board under a false representation of authority." My uncle's jaw tightened. "And this," Mr. Calloway said, placing his hand on the third, "is the clause Robert Mercer added to his estate documents in September of 2 years ago." He read it aloud. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen. My brother found his voice first. "That clause that's unenforceable. You can't just." It was drafted by a licensed estate attorney, filed with the court at the time of the will's registration, and has been reviewed by 2 additional attorneys in the past 30 days, Mr. Calloway said. "It is entirely enforceable." "We were protecting the estate," my mother said. Her voice had gone thin and high, the voice she used when she was frightened. "Fiona wasn't here. No one knew if she was coming back. Someone had to." "I have a letter," I said. Everyone looked at me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. Not from Mr. Calloway, from me. I'd written it on the last night in Montana by hand, because I needed to say it in my own words before I said it out loud. "I've had 30 days to think about every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every conversation I thought was just us being a family. And I've been trying to figure out if I missed something, if there were signs I ignored, if I was naive." My brother started to speak. I kept going. "I wasn't naive. You were careful. That's different. And I think somewhere in you, you knew that what you were doing wasn't right, because you waited until I was gone to do it. You didn't say any of this to my face. You filed paperwork. You made phone calls. You listed yourself on property you have no claim to." I looked at my mother. "You made me a casserole." She flinched. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. "You are." Mr. Calloway produced the second set of documents. Because of the clause which was triggered the moment my brother filed the petition and my uncle made unauthorized contact with the board, their secondary interests in the estate, the ones listed as contingency inheritances, were now forfeit. My grandfather had left modest amounts to both of them under normal circumstances. Those amounts were gone. Mr. Calloway also presented a formal letter to the probate court, withdrawing my brother's petition which he was asked to sign. Refusal would trigger a full audit of his financial interactions with estate assets since the date of the will reading. My uncle was presented with a cease and desist for making any further contact with Mercer Industrials Board, clients, or employees on the company's behalf. My brother looked at the documents for a long time. His hands were very still on the table. "You set us up," he said. He wasn't angry. He sounded genuinely stunned, like a man who has reached the end of a hallway and found a wall where he expected a door. "No," I said. "Grandpa set you up 3 years ago. He just needed to know if the setup would be necessary." "He loved us," my mother said. It came out almost like a question. "He loved all of us," I said. "He also knew exactly who you were." My uncle signed first. I'll admit I didn't expect that. I thought he'd push back the hardest. But he looked at the documents, looked at Mr. Calloway, did the math in his head, and picked up the pen. There was something almost dignified about it. He was wrong about everything he'd done, but at least he knew when the hand was over. My brother signed 10 minutes later, after staring at the wall for a while and saying things like, "This isn't what I wanted. And you have to understand the pressure. And we were just trying to protect the family, and I sat very still through all of it and did not argue with any of it, because there was nothing to argue with. He believed his own version. That was his problem now, not mine. My mother didn't sign anything because she didn't need to. She had no legal standing in any of the estate documents, and the property inquiry had never gone far enough to require a formal response. But she sat at that table and watched her son and her brother-in-law sign away what they'd been reaching for, and when it was done, she looked at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. Maybe I was. Maybe the version of me she recognized was the one who would have been too grateful, too unsure, too worried about keeping the peace to look clearly at what was happening. That version of me didn't walk out of that probate attorney's office 2 months ago. A different one did. After my brother and uncle left, my mother sat at the table alone. I started toward the door and she said my name quietly like she used to when I was a kid and had done something she didn't have words for yet. I stopped. "I didn't know they were going to file the petition," she said. "Your brother didn't tell me until after." I thought about that for a moment. "But you talked to the property assessor?" She was quiet. "Before I left," I said. "Before I went to Montana. You'd already called someone about the house." She didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. "I'm not going to fight with you," I said. "I'm not angry. I'm just done being the person in this family who assumes the best about everyone else because it's easier than seeing clearly." I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when she said, "He always said you were the one who paid attention." I turned around. She was looking at the table, not at me. "He used to say, 'Fiona notices things. The others want things. Fiona notices.' I thought it was just something grandparents say." She paused. "I didn't know he was taking notes." I stood there for a second. There was grief in the room, real grief. The kind that doesn't have a clean villain. The kind where people you love reveal that love was never quite the word they meant when they said it. "Take care of yourself," I said, and I meant it, and I left. Mr. Calloway was waiting by his car in the driveway. He handed me a small envelope, ivory-colored, sealed, with my name on the front in my grandfather's handwriting, slanted, a little hurried, the way he always wrote. "He left this with me 4 months before he died," Mr. Calloway said. "He asked me to give it to you after everything was settled." I held it for a moment without opening it. "Did you read it?" I asked. "No," he said. "That was between him and you." I opened it in my car, parked in my mother's driveway, with the engine running and the heat on because Portland in spring is still cold when the sun goes down. His handwriting covered one side of a single note card, short, direct, like him. "Fiona, I knew you'd handle it right. I'm sorry I made you find out this way. The company is yours because you built something of your own without asking me for a cent, and that told me everything I needed to know. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for keeping what you earned. The people who wanted it never would have taken care of it. You will. I love you. Grandpa." I sat in the car for a long time. Then I drove home, called my operations manager at Mercer Industrial, introduced myself as the incoming owner, and scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. I still have the notecard. It's in my desk drawer under a copy of the company's first quarterly report from when I took over, which, for the record, showed a 12% increase in contract renewals after I renegotiated the terms my uncle had been slowly letting expire for his own reasons. My brother and I haven't spoken since that Saturday. My uncle sent a brief email 3 weeks later that said nothing in particular. My mother and I have exchanged a few texts. Short, careful, like two people navigating a room where something fragile broke and no one has decided yet what to do about the pieces. I don't know what comes next with any of them. I don't know if the distance is permanent or just necessary for now. I've stopped trying to predict it because predicting how people will behave was never something I was actually good at. I thought I was. I wasn't. What I'm good at, apparently, is noticing and building things and holding on to them when people try to take them apart. My grandfather knew that before I did. I'm starting to trust that he was right. I keep the notecard in my desk drawer, not framed, not displayed, just there, under a quarterly report, where I can open the drawer and see it without making a thing of it. My grandfather wrote 11 sentences that took him 40 years to earn the right to mean. What I've been sitting with, the thing I can't quite shake, is how early he started paying attention. 3 years before he died. 3 years of watching, of saying nothing, of writing a clause into a legal document that none of us knew existed. That's not luck. That's the kind of patience I don't think most people are capable of, the kind that requires you to see people clearly and love them anyway, without letting that love blur what you're seeing. I think about that a lot when I think about what my brother did. He didn't file that petition because he was cruel. He filed it because he wanted something and believed wanting it badly enough made it rightfully his. That's not malice. It's a failure of honesty, the kind that happens slowly, quietly, when a person never develops the habit of asking themselves whether what they want and what they deserve are actually the same thing. My grandfather built a business over 4 decades by understanding the difference. My brother never learned to make that distinction. That gap is where everything fell apart. And my uncle, there's something almost instructive about watching a man who has spent a lifetime performing authority finally meet a document that doesn't care how confident he sounds. All those phone calls to the board, all that language about the family's representative during the transition period. He was fluent in the dialect of power without any of the actual substance behind it. The world is full of people like that, and for a while they move through it convincingly, but the math always catches up. My grandfather knew that too. What I keep returning to is what it cost me to get here. Not the legal fees, not the 30 days in Montana, not the conversation with my mother at the end of a very long Saturday afternoon. What it cost me was the version of my family I had been carrying in my head, the one where everyone wanted what was right and sometimes just disagreed about what that looked like. Losing that version wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like setting something down you've been carrying for so long you forgot it had weight. I didn't win anything I hadn't already earned. That's what my grandfather's letter made clear, and it's what I'm still learning to fully believe. The company didn't become mine because I outmaneuvered my brother. It became mine because I'd spent years proving without an audience that I was someone who could be trusted with it. The trust, the real kind, not the legal kind, came first. Everything else followed. That's the part I want to remember when this gets hard, and it does get hard. Running a company you inherited under these circumstances is not a clean beginning. There are relationships to rebuild with the board. There are vendor contracts that need attention. There is the quiet, persistent work of proving to everyone who watched this unfold that I'm here for the right reasons. I'm not special for surviving what my family tried to do. People survive worse every day. What I'm trying to be, what I think my grandfather was asking me to be, is the kind of person who survives it without becoming smaller because of it, who keeps noticing, keeps building, keeps holding on to what's real. He believed I was already that person. I'm working on believing it myself.